Oh yeah. Hey yo, it's the Russo Show. Hey yo, it's the Russo Show.
Hello and welcome to Pizza Film School. This season we're exploring the world of AGBO's essential creative partners. These talented individuals work their magic behind the scenes, contributing their expertise to a variety of components involved in creating a film. One of the most vital collaborations in the cinematic world is the fusion of visual storytelling and musical composition. Today's episode is extra special as we have the honor of hosting a true legend in the world of film and music, Alan Silvestri. His exceptional compositions have brought to life countless iconic films such as Forrest Gump, Polar Express, and the Back to the Future series. He is a two-time Academy Award and Golden Globe nominee, two-time Emmy recipient, and three-time Grammy winner. As our collaborator on Avengers: Infinity War, Endgame, and our upcoming film, The Electric State, we are beyond excited to discuss his epic career and the magic behind his work. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to Pizza Film School, Alan Silvestri.
Thank
Alan,
you, guys.
thank you so much.
Joe.
Quickly, we'll get this out of the way so that we can get into the conversation.
Sure.
So our pizza today comes from Milo and Olive, which is located in Santa Monica, California. This LA staple is not only known for their fantastic pizzas, but also their giant garlic knots. Here we go. As far as the pizza goes, we have a lovely crispy pepperoni and a marinara to share. We also have a bottle of our guest's wonderful wine, because not only is Alan
A legendary
the most amazing
composer.
music maker, he's also a master winemaker, remarkably. Alan, will you just tell us a little bit about your wine?
Well, my wife Sandra and I decided about 25 years ago that this little open space out in Carmel Valley might look good with a few vines on it. We went through the whole life cycle of a vineyard. We spent probably better than 2 years doing soil samples, water samples, tracking all of the environment. We discovered that it was a great place for a Chardonnay, a Pinot Noir, and a Syrah. So we started with those three, and we planted in the year 2000. First vintage was 2003. Very often, your first vintage, after you take a few photos, you pour it all down the drain because it's undrinkable. But in this case, it was drinkable, and we sold through everything, which was amazing.
Well, it's one of our favorite wines, and this Red Ranger Syrah was just awarded a 93 for
Yes, it
Wine
was
Enthusiast.
a wine enthuist, absolutely.
This
So,
is the best thing that we've had on our pizza table.
Deserves it.
cheers, guys.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Cheers.
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 Good to have you here, sir. So, Alan, the approach to Pizza Film School is to demystify the filmmaking process, try to make it accessible to the viewers. One of the ways in which we do that, we just talk about early careers, how you got involved, what got you into music, and then what transitioned you into filmmaking.
Basically, what we're asking is, we think of you as a superhero in the movie making world, and we want your origin story.
No cape though, guys. I mean, I need a suit.
You look great without a cape.
So it's, look, I grew up in a Irish-Italian family. On the Italian side, somebody's got to play the accordion. It's usually the firstborn. So my sister was 3 years older than me. She had to play the accordion. I used to literally sit during her lesson behind a comfy chair in the living room with a notebook, one of those old blue 3-ring notebooks, and chopsticks. And I would play along with her lesson. I would take my notebook in Saturday mornings when cartoons were on, and I'd play along with all the cartoons. So I just loved
Improvisation.
it. Yeah, just,
What you were feeling from the cartoon.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And I was 4 years old at the time.
Wow.
So when I got to grammar school, I wanted to play drums. And I started to play drums through the school experience. I guess I might have been 14 years old. My dad gave me a stocking stuffer one Christmas. He gave me a very inexpensive guitar and a Mel Bay primer. I literally put the drums aside and said, I want to play the guitar now. And I began to just sit there and play and play and play. Wound up going to a summer program at what was then the Berklee College of Music in Boston. Then I was completely hooked. I knew I wanted to go there at the end of high school. And I did. And all through high school, I wrote for small ensembles. I had a little jazz band. I played guitar at weddings and school dances.
Did your sister stick with the accordion?
She did for a while. I'm going to make her go back, though, because she could really play.
When you're composing, are you playing
Yes.
a lot of the instruments yourself?
Yeah, I compose on the piano.
Yeah.
And I don't really play the piano, but I play well enough to use it as a compositional tool. When I send a piece of material to you guys, very often I will do the whole mock-up presentation myself. Certainly early on in the project. Later on, I will have help with that process. So when you hear this orchestral rendering, I'm putting all that
It's you
together.
with a MIDI and synths. And
Yeah, I have a
Samples,
full-blown system. But it's interesting, I still write with a pencil and paper. And that's how it all begins. Like, certainly in Infinity War and Endgame, everything began with a 3-line sketch, pencil and paper. Then I move that into a notation program. Then I may move that into what they call a DAW, a digital audio workstation, which makes something that you guys can listen to with film in sync.
Are you hearing it from a process standpoint, hearing it in your head?
What I've discovered about that is, I don't know if you guys remember playing things like War, let's say, when we were young, and kind of sneaking around and, just, dun, 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 dun.
Create your own soundtrack?
Yeah, I would score my games, with my friends. It's exactly what I do on the job. When I see a piece of film, I start to feel a rhythm. I start to feel a mood. It's maybe a bit like a sculptor. I start taking things away to reveal the notes that I have this kind of broad strokes impression of.
That's like Michelangelo's process was very similar. He
Yeah,
described that in sculpting.
Yeah, it's very broad strokes, and it gets more and more in focus as you go through the process. The very first film I did, I wound up in a screening room with an old school film producer. I watched this movie. I didn't know what really to expect. And then I had to go through this 2-hour sit down with the producer. Well, what are you going to do, kid? What are you going to do? And I could have talked for 10 hours. I knew what I was going to do.
Wow.
And I'm like, who is this? What's going on? I wasn't a film buff. I had never thought about scoring films. But all of a sudden, the story aspect and how music could somehow interact with it, it was just like, well, yeah, I can help. That's what I feel when I watch a piece of film with no music. It's like, I can help these guys.
We can attest to that because we've seen the cuts of our Marvel films without your music, and we've seen them with your music.
And anybody watching could do the same thing. I mean, go look at one of your favorite scenes that Alan has scored and watch it without sound, and then watch it with his music, and you will have a completely different experience of it. Do you ever hear, like you were describing when you were playing games as a kid, sort of scoring that experience, do you hear music in other parts of your life?
Absolutely not. I don't wake up in the middle of the night with a theme in my head. It's literally like I walk into the room and I watch a scene, and then I start to hear music. It's crazy, I know.
And when you're, say with a movie like Avengers, there's a pressure to create a theme that has a hummability to it and an instant recognition quality and can bring almost like a branding element to the story.
Right.
Is there more pressure for you when you're trying to think of the key theme of something as large scale as the Avengers?
In a sense, it's the same. You kind of look, at least I do, I look for a way into the film. And very often that means I need to find a place in the film where if we're going to have a theme and we're going to use it, we better have it here and it better work. The origin of the original Avengers theme was kind of begun by this scene in the film where there's this raging battle and all hell's breaking loose. And all of a sudden, we see all our heroes like shoulder to shoulder. Well, that was the iconic shot, the iconic image from Marvel.
360,
yeah,
the
the
wraparound
360.
shot.
Yeah, it was this famous Avengers, almost a still shot. And I thought, okay, if we're going to play a moment full on without having to deal with narrative necessarily, better have it here. Or
We don't have one.
or we don't have it.
Right.
And then, how it came about was really colored by the fact that it was such a static moment. This little motif, this dee-da-da-da-dee-da-da-da-dee-da-da-da-dee-da-da. It's like, I got to keep something moving here because the whole movie stops. And then I thought, okay, I need something, as you described, Joe, something memorable, something heroic. So I knew it was going to be long notes played by the French horns, had to be simple, so it could travel in various iterations throughout the film. And so all of those elements became part of the genesis of the theme.
Let me ask you this, because it's very surprising to hear when you first started working in film composition that you were not a film fan previously.
Right.
And because you have a remarkably sophisticated storytelling sense, Joe and I have observed it in our experiences working with you, and you've helped us very much in that.
Who is in fact given some of the best notes in editorial that we get from anybody come from Alan.
Just a couple weeks ago, we were in the edit room on The Electric State with Alan, which we're editing right now, and we did more story talk than music talk, and that's always been an incredibly valuable part of our relationship with you and our collaboration with you. But where did you learn that sort of sophisticated sense of storytelling and how you shape a movie through music? Was it through watching a lot of stuff after you got involved, or do you reference other experiences you've had other than film?
When I sit and watch a film, certainly I've had so many experiences of watching films in their earliest stages. It's kind of like there's Post-its all over the place. It's like, do this here, get out of this here. I want more of this here. It's just almost instinctive. I don't think about it. I just have a feeling when we're too long at the fair.
Yeah.
And it's like, I need to go to another room now. When I write, for instance, I remember writing the scene in Father of the Bride where George has his two babies. He has his child and his grandchild in his arms at the same time. And when I worked on that, I was there bawling like a baby. And that's my flight instrument, if you will, because I feel if I'm crying, somebody else will. That's what I've distilled about it all after all these years, is that I've never acted, but I've developed tremendous empathy for acting because I have to, in a sense, do the exact same thing as a composer. I have to let the film come into me, and I have to let it become me, and then I have to perform. It was kind of a running joke in the house when I was working on Endgame. I'd come down to the house to see Sandra at the end of the day, and I'd be like this, She said, "What's up?" I said, "I've been killing Nat all day, and I'm gonna have to watch her die again tomorrow." And it's just
you're feeling the scene so that you can convey the scene through music.
You're basically approaching the experience through empathy with the characters in the narrative, and I find you an incredibly empathetic human being in general. It seems to be a way you sort of, a very strong quality in you in terms of how you experience life and others and art. And
if for younger composers out there, can you distill down into a sentence or two what is successful film composition?
I use the ship analogy. There's a captain. There's a first mate. There's a crew. The captain has a plan, hopefully, and I'm a crew member. So my job is to assist the captain in the telling of his or her story. that is the job. And music is my way of assisting the captain in the storytelling. And I would say to any young composer, editor, cinematographer, yes, my captain wants my ideas and has brought me on board for my opinion. And I mustn't be shy about that. But at the end of the day, it's about assisting.
I want to talk about how we initially met you, because it was such a remarkable sort of event in our careers. We were brought into the MCU to sort of further the story of the Captain America part of that narrative universe, right around the time that the first Avenger movie was coming out. It was such an amazing occurrence for Joe and I when it hit us as we were picking up the Avenger storytelling thread.
Right.
That you were the person who had to continue that process as the composer.
Well, I remember when we were in that screening, the 360 camera and the theme came on. I remember thinking, oh my God, we're in the big leagues now. Like,
It was intimidating.
This is serious shit.
That led us to an opportunity of working with you. Was remarkable. And it's not the normal route to get to work with a person whose career you've admired and work you've admired so much. So I feel very lucky that we almost had not quite an arranged marriage, but a bit of help.
Yeah, no, it was destiny.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's good.
Yeah.
No, it's fantastic.
As a filmmaker, being able to work with you really illustrates how incredibly important music is to conveying theme and emotion and storytelling. Really, I mean, I want to transition into talking about the portal scene from Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
Because we knew how much pressure was on that scene.
Yes.
People had spent an angst-ridden year worrying about their favorite characters, and we had teased this moment out for the better part of 2.5 hours.
Right.
It was not the Avengers theme, right, that we're going to be using there, right? It was going to be something new, right, that you brought to it. So to talk about this scene, I think it's really important to understand the storytelling of it. You can only get the audience to a high if you bring them to a low.
Right.
And part of the low was, the first chapter and the way that Infinity War ended. But it's also, you're in a moment where Cap is the only one left standing. And there has to be a certain tragedy. You have to imply to the audience, we may give you a similar ending to the last one here. You might not get exactly what you think you're gonna get. It's very elegant what you're doing here by pulling the audience into a low, and then you don't reverse it immediately. You slowly, as the heroes emerge. Not like when the first hero, it's not like when Panther emerges that you go right to a triumphant.
Right.
There's a nobility to it, but it's a quiet nobility. And then it builds to the end where they're all together and we get that giant expression of the Avengers theme, that quintessential expression of it. Just talk a little bit about that process of taking us from that low to the highest high.
Well, I think you guys set it up perfectly. You actually had a moment just before this where Cap was the most vital we've ever seen him. Like, where we almost felt, Cap can get these guys by himself. He's that magical, right? Then you basically let us see him get beat up till he's almost dead. And at the beginning of this, when he's there, the music stops because there's nothing left to play. He's gonna die. And then when he hears this voice, I mean, really the whole scene is kind of like a redemption. It's like he's dead. And all of a sudden, there's a hand that comes out to him. And then there's another one, and then another one. And so it starts to build. The solo trumpet is, it's not too far away from what taps does. I mean, it's like we're watching the death of a military hero, and yet when we get the great flyby, at that point we give the audience a little more hope. When we have these magnificent people coming out of the first portal, we're doing these big drums, and it's like uh-oh, there's some important stuff happening here.
Well, this is great that you're talking about this, because what I think why that scene is effective, and we went through a long process to get there, is because it's in Cap's point of view.
Yeah.
Right? Like, as the heroes arrive,
Absolutely.
right, it's exactly what you're describing. It's sort of bringing him back. He's not back immediately, but as more portals open, he starts to realize we may have this, right? And then he's fortified by the end of it. It's interesting because we haven't talked about this much, but we didn't have a lot of debates making these movies with our collaborators, but this was an intense debate. There was an original conception where it was sort of a rotating camera. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And all the portals were opening and everyone was coming out of the portals behind him. But it lacked that emotional through line of Cap being at his lowest moment and then slowly being fortified over the course.
Feeling each hand, as you put it.
And giving these characters who had disappeared, the audience had lost, letting them each take stage slowly. We put a lot of thought into who should appear and when.
Yeah.
And Panther being first, we felt was really important.
Absolutely.
Spider-Man landing when he did, we thought was really important. Pepper landing where she did, we thought was really important, because we knew that in 20 minutes, what was going to happen to Tony Stark. But it took us a lot of thought and debate to get to that sequence, and a lot of it actually was done in reshoots. Most of that sequence was, because the original interpretation of it was much more limited and didn't provide, I think, the proper canvas for you to do the work that you needed to do, because the story was not coming through our lead character, Cap.
One thing that always has really fascinated me about this particular piece of music you created was the way it goes from that sort of redemption idea, which Joe's describing in our original conception was playing out too quickly, and we had to sort of settle into it and elongate it, and your music certainly gives us that experience. But then you transition in this piece into something more rousing and focused. And it feels like a very difficult musical transition to make. And I'm always amazed by how natural and good it feels to me in this. Would you just talk a little bit about how you create that transition?
Well, I'm following you guys. I'm following what you did. And so it's not difficult because you've shot it that way. At least that's what came to me. I was very much aware of the fact that one of the things on the list for you guys to accomplish in the movie was, and one of the great things about the movie was getting the band back together, the extended band. These are such major forces in the cinematic universe, Spider-Man, Strange, all of them. Musically, you weren't going to be able to nod to each one. That would just be too chaotic. So, I had to look for this overall building anthemic approach. As these folks start to wind up with a certain kind of critical mass, now we're thinking, we could win this one. And so, we do want to start to make that transition. It's not, one soldier, a bleeding soldier on the battlefield that we're playing a trumpet for. And it builds like when Ant-Man comes out, it's like, Thanos is, and I love the way you cut to him in the middle of this. He's like, what the?
First time in the two movies that there's trepidation on it.
Yeah, it's like, what is this, At the end of It's a Wonderful Life, when George Bailey's in his living room and all the people are coming in to give him the money, to not destroy his life and the bank and all that. It's like all of his friends, all of his near and dear are coming to help him. It's spectacular, But it's all there in what you guys put together in the film. I just have to follow along, so.
Let's talk about another important scene, another use of the Avengers theme from Infinity War. Cap arrives for the first time in the film at a critical moment in the movie. I believe, but correct me if I'm wrong, we hold off on using the Avengers theme until this moment in the film.
Correct, yeah.
Because we wanted that emotional punch when he arrived. Because the Avengers have been fractured Again, this is the low moments versus the high moments,
Right,
right? So
right.
the end of Civil War, the Avengers are fractured.
They're destroyed as a family. The family is broken.
Cap is gone. He's on the run. He finally makes an appearance at a critical moment to save some friends of his. And this was your recommendation, to be very disciplined about the use of that theme and when it should come back into the story. You know, I remember watching this with an audience for the first time, and you could just feel the electricity in the theater.
Part of it was that discipline of like committing to the shattered relationship that existed between the Avengers, understanding how hard a repair might be, understanding the extraordinary circumstances that might be catalyzing this effort at repair, and then sort of letting it happen. Yeah. I mean, again, what I said earlier, if you really watch this scene without Alan's music, and then watch it with, and it's just a completely different experience.
Also, in the timeline of these movies, Avengers came out, how many years before this? Was it 7 years?
Quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly.
8 years. Yeah. So the theme hadn't been used in several years.
Right.
In this mosaic of storytelling. So there's also a level of discipline in that regard as well.
Well, this was really interesting because, you know, sometimes people talk about not leading the audience. We're totally leading them here.
Right.
It's like, as soon as Cap grabs this thing, it's like they're in trouble.
Right.
And we just go with it right away, you know. And everybody's looking at him, and it's just like, he's just going to kick their ass here. and we know it now. So we got to enjoy knowing that they're going to get their ass kicked now. And I always looked at this as kind of like a little mini Avengers ballet. You know, there's some beautiful moves that Nat's doing, and it's got a very kind of lovely sense of ballet. And by the way, when we use the big theme, and like you say, we use it rarely, but when we get to that, we're doing the same thing. It's like, they're in trouble now. Thanos is in trouble. If they're playing that tune, Thanos is in trouble.
The energy is starting to pick up.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And the movie starts in a place where Thanos is winning out of the gate.
Yeah.
So we needed to, again, pull the audience down lower. And this is a moment where they get a win. And we start to feel like, oh, the winds of change are here. The shift in direction is coming.
Exactly.
This may be the moment, now the Cap is back, that things start going their way. We always knew music was going to be critical to this scene because we stole it from one of our favorite movies, Once Upon a Time in the West. This is the reveal of harmonica, the lead character, which was also underscored with incredible music from Morricone. We knew that this, for the audience, would be that linchpin moment that shifted, and they would sit up in their seats and start to feel like,
We could win this.
yes.
We don't know for sure yet, but we could win this.
It's funny too, because again, part of the art of storytelling has to do with sometimes, like you're saying here, leading the audience. And part of the reason why we might have led the audience here is because of where the movie's going.
Right.
We give them that Avengers theme. We reignite those emotions in them that they waited 7 or 8 years for, that they've waited 40 minutes in this movie for. You know, when we give it to them, because at the end of the movie, that's not where the movie's going.
Right.
And that's, I think, part of the thrill ride of what Infinity War was, which kind of leads into our next clip.
The movie starts with Thanos killing the villain from the last Avengers movie to enforce, you know, in the audience's mind, to let them know that this is the strongest villain that they've come up against. So the shape of the movie starts with the low, then if we push you higher here with Cap's reveal, with the trajectory heading towards victory, only then to crush him in the last 5 minutes of the movie. There's another beautiful piece of music we're not going to talk about specifically, but where Wanda kills Vision. It was meant to also be that moment where it's so beautiful and it's so powerful that the audience is assuming, because we're giving them that emotion, that this must be it. This must be how they win this one. And without that music, minutes before what happens, I don't know that we have the same punch, because we haven't taken them to that place where they feel like this music is signaling to me a very powerful cathartic moment. This has to be the climax of the movie.
Thanos wins the movie. We thought of Thanos on a storytelling level always as like an anti-hero. He had a point of view. There was something noble in his point of view, but he was completely misguided in how he was pursuing it. And so as we were landing the movie at the end with Thanos as the victor and the sort of having vanquished the Avengers, we needed music to complement this moment for Thanos in terms of what it meant for him.
Because it came at a great cost for him as a character.
The closure of his arc, of his character.
We've said before, the movie is his movie.
Right.
And this last scene that we're going to talk about really cements that concept.
Right.
And I think presented audiences with one of the more complicated commercial movie moments that they've had in a long time, because the music is so sad and empathetic in a way that it leaves you confused as to how you're supposed to feel about what just happened in the movie. So to correlate this to a Western again, right? This is that moment where the hero has lost everything but won the war. Talk to us a little bit about how you came up with this theme and why you scored it this way.
We called this the retirement cue.
Nice. I see you on your vineyard right now.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so I could draw from experience. You know, I think, unlike Michael Corleone, I didn't see a whole lot of redemption or redeeming quality in Michael Corleone, but I do in Thanos. Thanos was always doing what he thought was the best thing for the universe. Always. He already had his farm. And look how he parties. He sits out on the porch and stares off, you know, over his
There's
land.
a level of discipline to him as a character that's admirable, irrespective of his sociopathic
Spectacular.
behavior.
He's like serving something larger than himself.
Thanos is always trying to do the right thing. Now, what was interesting is it's so kind of quiet. It's just strings. When I was going to the sound stage, I remember thinking, I don't know if I can end the movie like this. Mm-hmm. So it's like everyone went home at Abbey Road, and I said, okay, here's the parts, right? 2 violin parts, viola part, cello part, and a bass part. I said, all the strings play. And they played the exact same thing we have here. Okay, that's great. And it's had sound and weight and all that. I said, okay, now let's do one half the strings. And then we do that. And then I think I did another further breakdown, maybe 2 people on a part. Okay, we made that. And then I said, I want to do one with 1 person on a part. We do that. And when I came into the stage, I said, so what did they choose? He said, they chose the last one. I said,
That's right.
These boys are warriors because it's the greatest, most bold move. And it's interesting, it's got a very kind of reflective sense to it, but it ends with a device that was used hundreds of years ago in music where the piece is in a minor key, but the last chord is a major chord.
Yeah.
And you're expecting a minor chord from everything we've been given them. It just completely turns it. And just watching it now, at just around where that happens, Thanos actually, he gives a little, very imperceptible nod and almost the beginning of a smile, like, that was a heck of a day, you know, to get back to the Western, you know. I think I'm gonna have a smoke.
Well, a different composer might have shaded that with more menacing tone. You know, the mustache twirl, the villain has won. What was so profoundly moving to us, and this is why there are moments in the film like where he finally achieves the snap, where he is transported and then has to face his daughter, where he's shamed, and then he admits that it cost him everything. And you took that emotion and turned it into a solo piece playing at the end, where the retirement to him is, I have nothing left to do now but die, right? Like, it doesn't matter what happens. And we see that in the next film when they chop his head off. Nothing left for me to do other than die. And that's kind of what the piece says in a way. And that's where we always talk about the strange nobility of the character, irrespective of how insane he is. There's this admirable component of a commitment or a fidelity to the mission.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's a place where I feel the Michael Corleone connection. It's like, it's just business.
Not personally.
No, it's not personal. This is just business. And that's how the end feels. You know, this is a guy who like got back from his day job and he's sitting out on the porch.
Yeah.
You know, after a good day's work.
We heard many stories about people's reaction at the end of this movie where they would just sit in the theater after this, unable to
leave the theater after the end of the credits. Ruffalo had the craziest story. You remember this story?
Yeah.
So Mark Ruffalo's in a theater with his son and his son's friends. And Mark's in a baseball cap and he's got his hoodie up, but he wanted to see the audience's reaction. And he said that after the credits played, that everyone just sat there. The theater was dead silent. And then one guy got up and literally tore his shirt open. And started stomping around the theater. He was so angry. And Ruffalo said he put his hood up and he sort of snuck out of the theater. But the level of emotion, you talk about it as an opera, the level of emotion you're able to instill, and there's something about that cue that reinforced the finality of what just happened in this guy who's going to rip his shirt off his body because he's so enraged at the direction that the story went, the unexpected direction that the story took. This is what music can do. Without that cue, he doesn't rip his shirt off, I don't think.
I mean, that's something like the word we would reference a lot as we were telling the stories, opera. We've been in theaters and it sounds like the crowd literally sounds like a rock concert. Right. They're so loud sometimes. Right. Did the audience sort of reaction to these films, how these movies were playing, was that something that you were conscious of as you were scoring or not so much?
Well, not really that. I do have to tell you, you guys most wonderfully invited Sandra and I onto the bus.
That's the tradition, right? Opening night of a Marvel film.
Right.
We get a bus and then we go to theaters around Los Angeles, pop in, say hello to the crowd, stay and listen for a little bit just to see how the audience is responding.
I don't think we've ever had that experience. Like you're saying, it was like we were in an arena, a sports arena. They were so enamored of the movie, the characters, the MCU, and you guys delivered the goods for them.
All due respect, sir, the goods don't work without you.
Yeah, for sure.
We've sat on a mixed stage without the music and seen the movie without the music. It's a very different experience.
It's like, you guys have to deal with temp music because you have to show your film long before you have your score ready. I always look at it like the garment, you're in the fashion district here, right? It's like you have to go, buy clothes off the rack, and really everything needs to be tailored to your model. And, you could have the most beautiful model in the world, but if he or she isn't dressed, you don't have a fashion show, So part of it is the dressing, and the music is the dressing to create that overall image.
So, like Joe was saying, music is really important to us in terms of how we work. And you mentioned this with temp music, right? Yeah. So a lot of times you'll work, and just sort of for the sort of clarity with our audience, like you'll work with pre-existing pieces of music, score, oftentimes film score, that may sort of help you give a scene or a moment of the movie some kind of shape or tone of what you're going after. But the limitation with that is like you can kind of, sort of tonally complement moments in the movie and scenes, but there's no movement to it throughout the film. And so when the movie goes from temp to score, the movie blossoms in a way because all of a sudden you're taking ideas that you're playing with early in the movie in different scenes, tracking with different characters, you're building upon it, you're answering different ideas that you did musically earlier in the movie.
Right.
And all of a sudden there's an entire emotional flow to the music, and conceptual flow, intellectual flow, textural flow, everything.
Right.
The way a movie changes from that moment where it goes from temp to score is just
No, it's all part of the life cycle of the film and the process of it. I'm asked very often, do you want to see it with the temp or not? And I always want to see it with the temp. Something is sacrificed by doing that, which means I'm not going to have that fresh,
Right.
completely fresh impression. Okay, fine. But what I am going to have is I'm going to have some real data in terms of what you guys think you've got and where you're feeling you want to go. And you're giving me the message now through music, through a language that really speaks to me.
Intentionality.
Yeah, yeah. And then I don't have to go down some crazy road, for 2 months and walk in and you go, that's got nothing to do with what we're thinking, It's an incredible tool for us to communicate.
Did you have a moment in your career where you started to understand that as useful to you? Like, was there a period where you didn't want to hear temp or?
I've never had that. I like to hear as much of what the director's intention is as possible, as soon as possible. And I've had the experience where I write something and it's 180 degrees off. And that's not a good feeling, It's a waste of time. And I could have used some help to go down. You can go down 50 different roads and write beautiful things. You're on the captain's ship. You want to find out what the captain is thinking, because ultimately that's what's going to make for the most effective storytelling.
Well put, yeah.
We have a little segment we call Small Bites, which is sort of rapid fire questions, quick answer questions. If you could watch any piece of content for the first time again, anything, any story, film, television, whatever it is, what would that be?
One of my favorite things I remember seeing the first time was there's a scene in Superman where Dad has died and Superman as a young boy is out in this beautiful landscape and Mom comes up. And John Williams just wrote this sublime, beautiful piece of music for that. And I've never forgotten it. And, he's, what do they call it? The GOAT, the greatest of all time. For me, his music and what he's done for all of the film composers who are working while he's working and who will come for years and years in the future. It's just fantastic. So that would be one of the things that, and in a sense, it's so great. It's always like watching it for the first time.
Amazing. If you could go back and give one piece of advice to yourself in your early career, what would it be?
It would be always remember your place in the food chain. Because especially when I was younger, I would periodically be very confused. I had a great comeuppance once. I was working on the Chip Show. And it was in the very beginning. It was magnificent for me. I had a steady job in show business. It was a miracle. You'd score Monday morning, have lunch, see the next week's show in the afternoon, work 9 days, next Monday, boom, 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 right? So we did a disco episode with Paunch. They were doing a ripoff of Travolta.
Okay.
And I spent a lot of time on this number for him. And I thought, I'm going to kill these guys with this.
Yeah.
This is just slamming. So we get to next Monday. I get up there and I do this thing. And the producer's name was Cy Shermack. And Cy used to dress like Clint Eastwood. He'd be all in black and he'd have that Clint hat really low. And he'd sit at the console like this. And everybody around him was like terrified. And so I just, the band plays the heck out of this thing. It's great. And I turn around and this is at Sony, where it's got the big meat locker. I almost thought I could see traces of frost around the control room window. And I'm like, something's going on here. So I open the meat locker door, and walk in, and Cy's sitting there, doesn't look up. And I just kind of slither over and sit in my chair next to him where I sit for playbacks. And there's too much silence. right?
Yeah.
He said, you know, I have a very specific job I have to do. And he's not looking at me, he's facing forward. He said, you know, the studio hires me and I have to come in here and I have to take care of my actors. I have to really find ways to show them in their best light. And he said, I spend all my time doing that. He said, so please understand that this is not the Alan Silvestri hour. And I just felt like 50 knives went through me because I had lost my mind.
Yeah.
I had forgotten my place in the food chain because I'm supposed to be helping him.
Right.
I'm not supposed to be calling attention to myself. And it was such a profound, you know, comeuppance. I've never forgotten it. And I'm incredibly grateful for it. Creative people maybe all have a tendency to get so self-involved and buried in their process that they completely lose their minds and forget what the job is, what they're really supposed to be doing. This was the perfect example of it. And so that would be my bit of advice to anyone at any point, but certainly when you're young and starting out. You know, don't forget your place in the food chain. Remember why you're there in some place in yourself. So when you're going through all of your total immersion and self-indulgence, somewhere in there is this slightest little reminder that, oh wait, I'm supposed to be helping Joe and Anth here now. I'm not supposed to be like, you know, working on my album. You know, it's important.
I'm sure Cy did an amazing job with Chips, but our approach, we want to be surprised and told new ideas by our collaborators.
Yeah.
And one of the most important collaborations we've had in our entire career is with you.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And Infinity War and Endgame are not what they are without you. And that's critical too, I think, just to talk from our side of it, because it's a great story to end on. Our process, and I think Spielberg would say the same thing, that his career would not be what it is without John Williams, right? And we wouldn't be where we are without you. And that it's so critical to the process to be available as a storyteller to other storytellers that are coming in to work with you and help you tell that story. That the process for us is discoverable all the way up until the moment somebody sits down to watch it.
Right, right.
And I think you have taught us as much as anyone we've worked with about how to elevate material, where to find emotion, and most importantly, where the real essence of the story lies. And we're very grateful to you for that, and we're really grateful to you for sitting down with us today to talk
We're
about
the
it.
biggest fans of the Alan Silvestri show. That's basically
And the Alan Silvestri Vineyard.
Well, it's just an honor for me, guys, and you know, to come from the other side of the table when we had our first meeting on Infinity War, and you guys used the O word. You literally said opera. What that said to me was, wow, I can really go for it. Certainly you delivered the images, but you also delivered the freedom for me to kind of let my, you know, wildest imaginings come forward. And you know, what I admired about you guys through both of those films was that I can't imagine any filmmakers who have ever had a greater amount of pressure and expectation on them than what you guys had to deal with in those films. And yet, whenever I was around you, I always felt, well, Joe and Anth are playing with their movie. Musicians work incredibly hard to perfect their skills, but they call it playing music. And I always felt you guys were playing cinema. You had a lightness, certainly with me, where you didn't put that pressure, you didn't let it spill onto your crew. So I thank you guys for that. Both of
That's
you.
really nice to hear. Thank you.
Great to hear, but no good work comes from fear, right? It always comes from a place of comfort
Yeah.
and calm
Yeah.
and thoughtfulness. So And you've always brought that to us, so we're very grateful. So thank you again
Thank you.
for sitting down.
This is a blast. It's been
Very
wonderful.
special pizza film.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And do yourself a favor
Yes.
and get out and get some Silvestri Red Ranger, because as you can see, I think I polished off 2 glasses.
Yeah, I got to catch up now. I'm talking
I'm heading
too much.
for glass number 3.
Pop a bottle open and watch your favorite Alan Silvestri movies.
That's great, guys. Well, thank you so much for the invite. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for watching. Mangia bene. We'll see you next time.
Oh wow, yeah man, it's Pizza Film School. About to learn about the movies, man. Whoa, it's real cool.